Today's guest on the podcast is endurance writer and author Matt Fitzgerald. I talk about it in the beginning of the episode, but we recorded almost a month ago and talked about in depth and detail about his book, 80/20 Triathlon. Well, lo and behold, I went to publish the episode and only my voice recorded. So I was absolutely embarrassed and devastated, and I emailed Matt and I said, hey, you probably don't want to re-record. That was long. And he's like, sure, I'm glad to re-record, and we can do it on March 26th, which is publication day for my new book, Life is a Marathon. And I thought, sure, that sounds awesome. Cool. And he sends me a copy, a pre-read copy of Life is a Marathon, and I open it up, and in 2 nights, I'm done with the book. For those of you who know Matt as a writer, you know that he's an expert in nutrition and racing and all the factors that come with endurance, running, swimming, biking. But this book is not about that. It's a memoir of love and endurance, and he ties together running marathons with his very delicate and intricate relationship with his wife, Nataki, who was diagnosed with bipolar disorder about 5 years into their marriage. It was an absolute joy, laugh, and riot to read this book. It was so funny, so heartbreaking, so much of the human condition. Wherever you are in your own life, you will find some ties to Matt's struggle and Nataki's struggle and how they came out on the other side together. After one of her incidents, she went away for a while, and then they split up for a little bit. I don't think ever officially. But when they came back together, Nataki said in the book, I've learned a lot since I've been away. At first, I was all broken up inside, but now I feel much stronger. I realized all my life I've been trying to find happiness in a man. I was always looking for someone to take care of me, maybe because I didn't get everything I needed from my dad. I even tried to do that with God, but now I realize I have to be happy in myself because I love myself. No man can do that, not even you. I want to be with you, Matthew, but I don't need you no more. I can take care of myself. And Matt said, I'm really glad to hear you say that. So that's just one little small snippet from the book. You guys, Life is a Marathon, fantastic, and much gratitude to Matt Fitzgerald for taking more time out of his very busy life. And happy publication day. I hope you all enjoy this episode and pick up the book with Matt Fitzgerald.
Welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast with Meredith Atwood. We all have the same 24 hours each day, and it's what we do with those hours that makes all the difference between our health, happiness, and success.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Atwood. Today's guest is Matt Fitzgerald. Hi, Matt.
How you doing?
I'm good. So, everyone, this is the second recording with Matt. My bonehead forgot to somehow record Matt on the first time we recorded. So, welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be back.
So, I'm actually glad. I was telling Matt before we hit record that I was kind of glad. I know it was a sort of a pain that it didn't work out, because today is publication day for his new book, Life is a Marathon. And because the first recording didn't take, I had a chance to read this book before today. And it is absolutely fantastic, Matt. Really a fabulous book.
Those are words that every writer dreams of hearing.
Oh my gosh. I've read a lot of your books over the years. And I just sat down with this one, and I know it says a memoir of love and endurance, but I did not know just how soul-bearing and raw and honest this book was. So how different was writing this book for you?
Very. But I grew up with a novelist as a father, and I grew up always wanting to be a writer. And when I was young, I sort of dreamed of writing this kind of thing, not exactly this, obviously, but, telling stories. And what ended up being my career is more of, the sort of books of mine that you have read, and which I enjoy writing because, I enjoy writing those books because I have a huge passion for endurance sports, and I enjoy sort of educating and inspiring my fellow athletes. But still, though this book may come out of left field for some, like it is not so much for me, I guess.
Well, because it's your life, it's your story.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, I don't know what I was expecting, but do you want to give us a little kind of recap or summary of what the book sort of is about? I mean, I have a million. You gave me this beautiful hardcover, and I've destroyed it with pen ink and dog ears, which my mother would fuss at me about. But I marked so many passages, and it's just so good. So, do you want to give us a little summary of what it's about?
Yeah, so I think of it as a book about what running does for those for whom it does the most. People who have tested their limits, and this goes for all endurance sports, mainly focuses on running. People who test their physical and mental limits as endurance athletes, it can be a transformative experience. It certainly has been for me. It has given me a strength that I was not born with. The first scene of the book is me failing to show up to the start of an important track race in high school, and the burden of shame that left me with, something I carried with me. It might not sound like a big deal, but as I say somewhere in the book, a coward on the race course is a coward off it. So I just saw this gap between the person I was and the person I wanted to be, and lo and behold, as fate so arranged things, my wife, Nataki, developed bipolar disorder, a few years into our marriage. She was diagnosed back in 2004, which ended up just being a much greater test of endurance than the races that had, sort of been more than I could handle even as an adolescent. So, but the stakes were so much higher because, Nataki, my wife, is my soulmate. That's one race, if I could use that metaphor, I was not going to quit on.
Yeah.
So, in a weird way, in a weird way, like pursuing strength and courage as an athlete prepared me to be the husband and caregiver I have needed to be for Nataki. So it kind of sounds like two books in one. It's about running, but it's also the story of a marriage. But to me, they're inextricably linked, and I hope that anyone who reads the book will see how they all both those threads tie together.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who is married and who has done some marathons, they're definitely intertwined. So totally well done. I love at the end of the book where you say the one thing everyone wants is to be happy. We seek happiness in all we do, however misguidedly at times. To become the person you want to be, you must first define that person, and then you must work hard to close the gap between your current and best selves. I absolutely love that. And I think what was so just amazing about this book is how it was a story about you trying to become your best self, and in order to be the best version of yourself, you had to also not take care of someone else, but also put someone else's needs first, and that turned out to be the way that you became the best version of yourself. Yeah,
that's exactly right. There's an odd tension, sort of one of the themes in the book is, the flaw in my character that I discovered early in life was, sort of a faint-heartedness, a lack of mettle. And I worked on that through sport. But then in the context of my marriage, because I was already with Nataki when I sort of, got back in, because I had quit, and then I got back into it. And it was, my journey. So I was, sort of working on myself so obsessively that a sort of second flaw was exposed, which I refer to in the book. I think the phrase is an almost solipsistic self-absorption. So I mean, it is sort of interesting that, and another point, I keep quoting myself here, another point in the book I said, so is running the problem or the solution? Yes. So, it's a weird thing, like, because I was always destined for marriage. You know, I wanted to find a soulmate. I wanted to have a partner in life's journey. But there's also a part of me that is ill suited to it, personality wise, because I do tend to put myself first. So, you know, it's one of those things where I never, neither Nataki nor I ever could have wished upon ourselves, you know, the struggle that we've gone through. But it has done me some good. You know, she did me a lot of good just by who she is before she got sick. But the journey we've been on, you know, has, you know, we have had to grow. We've had no choice but to grow in order to survive together and get to where we are today.
Well, one of the things I found so remarkable were some of the stories you told about when she would have her episodes. And it almost, you wanted to laugh and then you wanted to cry, and then you would put yourself in your position and think, oh my gosh, like how terrifying. Is there any story that you want to maybe tell us on the podcast so people can get an idea? Because until you read it all, you won't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, there was an article on Outside Magazine that was published just yesterday. I don't know if you saw it, but one of the stories. So it's related to the book. You know, highly condensed, obviously. But in there, I tell, you know, a brief version of what I probably consider our worst day, which came 3 years after Nataki's diagnosis. And, you know, bipolar can take many forms. And for Nataki, you know, one of the ways it manifested was, you know, occasional violence against me. She was never violent with anyone else, thank goodness. But there would be times when she just, you know, just kind of lost control. And, you know, I'm not going to blame myself, but I did not know how to do my job as a caregiver terribly well. So I would not make the best moves in order to sort of, you know, when she was not doing well, I would sort of make things worse in an effort to make them better. And there was just one day when I found her burning some of her books, and I tried to get her to stop, and it became a physical altercation with a knife involved. And this one, you know, Nataki's a strong, athletic woman. You know, she's a little older now, but back then, you know, it was sort of a fair fight. And, you know, and so, you know, there were, in some of those situations, you know, it was not clear to me that I was going to live. You know, as brutal as that sounds, that is how I experienced some of these moments. And, you know, we ended up flipping over a couch, and, I did as little to fight back as I could, in these situations. But in this particular situation, I popped her twice with a closed fist and was able to extricate myself, flee, call the police. The police were called and arrested me for domestic battery.
Right.
And I went to jail. The scene, it took all too long to unfold out in our cul-de-sac here. Lots of neighbors watching. And, you know, I spent the night in jail and actually tried to take my own life the next morning when I got out of jail. It was something I had thought about often, because I was pretty hopeless. You know, it just, you know, we were trying so hard to beat this thing and to move past it, but, you know, years were going by, and, you know, it's that ember of hope. It's hard to attach it to nothing. And at that moment, that was when I came very close to quitting again, with, you know, a lot more at stake than when I failed to show up to the start line of that track race in high school.
I think it's just so amazing that you shared the story about, you know, how close you got to ending your life. I mean, I had a similar incident, not in the garage, but with alcohol when I was early 20s. And it's always surprising to me how many people, how much we have in common with that one fact, that life does get hard enough where we're just like, I don't think I can do it. And so I just want to thank you for sharing that, because I think it's so important that people read it and see how you overcame it. But one thing that just cracked me up is how these altercations always seem to happen when you didn't have pants on. Or shoes, right? Yeah. But then pants in another one. You didn't have pants on in another one.
Well, I was stark naked in another situation. But
always shoeless.
Yeah, I mean, I never wear shoes in the house, and so it's just comfortable. It's probably good for you.
Right.
But, when you have to flee, it's not so good. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because, it is a raw and real book, but there's quite a bit of humor in there.
I mean, some things were so funny, you're just about to cry, and then you write something so funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just, it's just, the whole point was just to be authentic, and so I just kind of wrote it the way I experienced it, and I wasn't trying to be funny. It just, that's what came out. And then at other times I wasn't, maybe trying to tug on the heartstrings, but that's also the way it came out.
Yeah. Well, how was it when you sat down to talk to Nataki about writing this book? I mean, you're telling a lot of her stories, and obviously you guys talked about it, but, where is she in all of this? Yeah,
I mean, there's no, to quote myself again, I won't, but in the author's note, I try to draw attention to the courage and trust it has taken on Nataki's part to allow someone else, granted her spouse, but not her, to tell, a version of her story, and a story, that has some of the elements that ours has. I mean, that is rare. There are just not many wives who would have permitted that. And I'm so grateful for the trust she put in me. But it took a long time to get to this place. It took 5 years before Nataki really would even tell anyone that she was bipolar. She just didn't want to believe it. It's very common, and there's a name for it, for anosognosia, just not accepting the reality of the illness. So it was a long process, but then, eventually, I was just talking to one of my brothers about this. It's one of those things that's hard until it's easy. It's sort of like, like jumping off a bridge into a river, like you're scared to do it. And then it's just about letting go, you know what I mean? And once you let go and you fall and you land in the water and it's refreshing and fun and you want to do it again, it's like, why was that so hard? Mm-hmm. And this was, it's probably a terrible analogy, but it was sort of similar, where the idea of just putting everything out there was terrifying until we embraced it. And the big thing, Nataki's a healer by nature. She lives to, help people. And when she got to a point in her journey, where she realized that telling her story actually could help other people, that's when this became something, she really wanted to do. It's still scary as hell. I mean, the book was published today. That Outside Magazine article I mentioned came out yesterday. And we've been talking about it as recently as this morning, that she's afraid of how people will react, to how they will look at her. So, even now it's not easy. But I'm very, very confident that she won't regret it, and that it really will help people.
Well, just tell her I think she's great, and she's funny too. Y'all are both very funny. I would like to write her with you. Well, what I thought was so interesting, like I said, I've read so many of your books along throughout the years. Like How Bad Do You Want It is one of my absolute favorites, and I kind of looked them up on the internet, like while I was reading Life is a Marathon, and put a timeline in my head together about when all this was going on, and you were writing these other books, and it's just so interesting how you really never know what someone is going through. I mean, you're writing these books, you're an expert in your field, and then this is going on at home. And I just thought that the fact that you shared all of that in this book just really gave an amazing perspective on the fact that you really never know what someone's battles are.
No, honestly, even though I lived it, sometimes I look back on, we're really talking about, a full decade, right, when things were not good. We had good days, and I don't want to paint it with too broad a brush. It was a rough decade, But then, yeah, from the outside looking in, it was a very productive decade where, I'm writing books and racing, but I had to, you know what I mean? Like, Nataki couldn't work, and running for me was an outlet and a source of strength. So it helped, though it wasn't always easy to run if I had not slept, the night before.
Or if you had been barefoot running through the streets.
Yeah. And there's also stuff, I couldn't put everything in the book, but there were times when, I couldn't be at home. So I would have to camp out somewhere and still, just find a way to get in front of the computer and pay the bills. And, I'm not really looking for any more sympathy than readers of the book will be inclined to give me. But
I don't think it's sympathy. I mean, it's just respect. I mean, I just feel nothing but more respect than I had for you before. I mean, because it's like, wow, he was pumping out those amazing books and he was sleeping on whatever couch he could find.
Yeah. It was, it is what it is. I'm so glad, even now I wonder, boy, could I go through it again? Cause I am stronger and wiser now, but geez.
Well, hopefully you don't have to. Hopefully you just won't have to redo it.
No, well, the work that we've done, it can't be undone. So there will, life remains hard. So there are more challenges ahead for us, but they will be different, and I think we're ready for them, whatever they are.
So the book is Life is a Marathon, a memoir of love and endurance, and today is publication day, so happy day, happy day. So I do want to talk about your other book, 80/20 Triathlon, a little bit before you go. This is more of the Matt Fitzgerald we're all accustomed to. So we covered this in great detail in the podcast that will never be, but let's talk a little bit about what 80/20 Triathlon is and how it works, like the training philosophy. Yeah, so those numbers, that ratio 80/20 refers to what is considered in contemporary science and real world best practice to be the optimal intensity balance for pretty much all endurance sports. The 80 being referring to low intensity and the 20% referring to moderate to high intensity. So if the idea is that if you train with that balance of intensity, which virtually all elite endurance athletes do and virtually no one else does. So if you train with it, it's sort of a universal. If you train with that intensity balance, it's better than pretty much any alternative. That's it in a nutshell. Yeah. And so why don't people train this way? Why don't people train the way they should train? It's probably a better question. Yeah, a variety of reasons. So it should be said, so what are most people doing? Like the typical competitive recreational runner is spending about 50% of his or her weekly training time at moderate intensity. I refer to it as the moderate intensity rut. So most people, when they think they're training easy, are training sort of moderate, as physiologists define it, exercise physiologists. For triathletes who are sometimes higher volume, it's maybe closer to 70-30, 65-35, which sounds like in the ballpark of 80/20, but it's not. It's not close enough. It's not good enough. If you go from 65-35 to 80/20, you will feel better and perform better and get fitter. As to why, there's in the book, I identify no fewer than 8 reasons that people get stuck in the moderate intensity rut. One of them simply is that, non-elite athletes have a smaller low intensity range. So, if you take someone who is, a relative beginner, maybe is carrying a few extra pounds on them, and is just maybe, not the most genetically gifted, just someone with, an average talent for the sport, that person, when they, go out and jog at 12 minutes per mile is maybe already close to what's known as the ventilatory threshold, which is the threshold between low and moderate intensity. So whereas, an elite male triathlete can run at 5.5 minutes per mile and still be at low intensity,
technically, the rest of us can't really do that. So we have less room to work with, and we need to be like more, disciplined and restrained. When our intent is to train at low intensity, it takes some monitoring, to stay at low intensity.
Mm-hmm. Another one of your books we talked about last time is diet cults and how messed up people are about nutrition. I know this personally, and I mean, all you got to do is just turn on your Facebook, turn on Facebook. Who turns on Facebook? Turn on the TV, turn on Facebook, and you see how messed up we all are about nutrition. So this book is probably one of your, I guess, lesser known books, but it's really good too. So I did want to bring some attention to it. What was the kind of impetus behind that book?
Yeah, so like anyone who I'm a sports nutritionist. I've written a lot about nutrition. I counsel athletes. I've consulted for sports nutrition companies, and so anyone in that position where they're in a professional capacity telling other people how to eat, well, inevitably you run up against some resistance and pushback because people are getting all kinds of discordant messages from, like, just as you suggested, everywhere they turn. So, I'm preaching one gospel, but the person I'm trying to reach is hearing 99 other gospels. And so it's frustrating when you feel like you are offering good information. It's just like, just do what I say, I promise. But people, like, just simply getting buy-in is really difficult. And I almost majored in sociology back in college, and so there's a little bit of an amateur sociologist. So I became pretty interested in the why. Why do people have such a hard time kind of thinking straight about
what we eat,
food and nutrition? So Diet Cults is really a book that attempts to answer that question. It's my best attempt to, like, kind of reach the people who just are susceptible to some of the messages that, maybe sound great, but, aren't scientific things in the world. Yeah.
Well, Matt, I'm not going to keep you on publication day. I know it's busy, and I'm just so grateful you came back on, and thank you for your new book, Life is a Marathon. It's going to make a big difference, and please tell Nataki that she's a star, and I'm thankful she let you write it as well.
I'm pretty sure she's in earshot and overheard that. So yeah, I'll thank you on her behalf. And yeah, I'm just really tickled that you enjoyed the book and got something out of it.
I reviewed it on Amazon. See, my book came out, 2 weeks ago, and I know the importance of the Amazon review. I think it was the 4th review today. So everyone needs to read it and review it.
Your check is in the mail, Meredith.
All right, Matt, well, take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right, thanks.